Hi everybody. So my name is Adam Liptrot. I work at HMRC as part of their accessibility team. So inside that team, there's a group of people who do audits. I'm a member of that team. So we carry out audits on behalf of HMRC on services that we both produce ourselves inside HMRC, but also on services that we procure as well. So we make sure that the services meet the public sector body accessibility regulations. And that means that they meet a baseline of accessibility for anything that the department puts out into the public sphere. As part of that role, we undertake a set of different audits. So there are three main audits for HMRC. We have our primary audit, which is the main event. This is a week-long audit. Now, this takes place just prior to a service going into public beta. So public beta is one of the phases of a service lifecycle. And it's where the service goes into the public domain for the first time. There are also private beta alpha phases, as you can see on this diagram. And what we want really is for teams to be communicating with us throughout all these phases to talk to us about what they're looking at as a point of view of design and user flow and the components they'll be using, and any issues that they might be finding with using those components. And we want to make sure that the services are thinking about accessibility all the way through the phases, not just when we get to an audit. So we want the audit outcome really to be kind of like a known thing for the teams, not to be a surprise. So I say there are three main types of audits that we do. The main audit, as I say, is a week-long exercise. It's done on a staging server for the service. And it's where we throw loads of different types of assistive technology and tooling at the service to make sure it's okay. Before we do that, there's a pre-audit which takes place about 2 weeks beforehand, which is about a sprint's worth of time. And that gives us a little bit of an insight as to what's going on in the service, how accessible it is. It also gives the team a bit of a heads up as to some of the issues that we might be finding in the main audit. It gives them a chance to fix them prior to the audit itself. And then there's a retest. So just like an MOT for your car, if you have MOT and it fails, you get to go back with a retest. And same with our audits. If you have an audit and there's some issues outstanding, you can come back and we'll just validate those fixes. So it won't require a full audit. So I'll just take you through our audit processes. So this is our audit board. So most of it's been blurred out because these are live services or being developed services. But this basically shows how we manage our audits. So each of these cards is an audit or service. And you can see we've got several columns. So we've got to do. So these are services which we know about and have requested audits. And these are just waiting for their time slot to come up. The ready column is for services which are about to start their audit. So there'll be next week's audits. Review in progress, so obviously ones that are ongoing now. Review approved. These are audits which have been finished technically, but they are having the reports written and they'll be sent off to the teams, at which point they'll move into the final column, which is the done column. And there's quite a few audits over there in the done column. So the one we're looking at today is this apply for a permit service, and this is a demonstration service I've built for this presentation. It's not a real service, but it'll give us a few ideas of how we approach audits at HMRC. So let's have a look at this card. So each of these services, these audits has one of these cards, which has some information for help us kick us off with the audit. So it's got a lead dev or lead auditor. So each audit has one of these. And this is the person responsible for some of the setup, procedures, but also managing anybody else who comes on to help out with the audit and signing tasks, etc. We've got service contact, so that's somebody on the team who will be talking to you as the primary contact. We always set up a Slack channel for each of these audits. This allows us to have an ongoing conversation with the team. It means that we've got access to the full team, the designer, the researcher, the devs, and the QAs, and the business side as well. So we have a proper conversation about any issues we find, if there's an issue with how a fix might be implemented, or we've got questions about why they're doing something a particular way. We can ask the team and get a response back. And sometimes it means that there's no issue to report, and sometimes it means we maybe change our suggestion for a resolution. There's an audit activity task board here as well, and that's where we would set up our main board, which I'll show you in a second. And then we've got the user journeys. So this the user journeys document is the most important thing on here. It's what the services send us as part of the setup. So because these are transactional services, they're not websites, they're not things where we can just go in and pick out a few components or pages to do sampling testing. We have to go through these services step by step, entering particular types of data to get particular journeys through branching journeys. So we have to have a guided set of steps through each of these journeys. And each service will give us several journeys, maybe 3, 5 journeys. And each of those journeys will consist of several steps. It can be as little as 3 steps, or it can be as many as 80 steps. But they kind of average around about 10 to 20. So the user journeys will also include some credentials, because they say these are transactional services. They sit behind authentication. So we have authentication service set up. So we enter some data that the service gives us, and that sets the service up as a particular type of user with a particular set of data, and allows us to act as that user. These are all not real users. These are all set up for test purposes. So that's the audit card. This is the audit board itself. So the audit board is where we manage our actual workflow for the audit. So again, it's like a standard Kanban board. We've got a to do, an in progress, and a done column. These are where we use. This is what we use for our tasks. So you can see on the to do side here, we've got a bunch of tasks. So we've got a keyboard only, check code, JAWS, voice recognition, screen reader, etc. And there's a bunch of tasks in there which we'll perform on every single journey end to end throughout the service user journeys document. And then in the issues column, this is where we record the issues we find. And when we're doing a retest, we'll add another column for fixed issues, and then we'll move issues across into that. For the first journey, what we're doing, and we're going to do 2 checks. So the first thing we do is pull across the code check, and we'll also pull across the keyboard only check. So these 2 are the sort of the baseline. These kind of things we do in a pre-audit check, but they're also the first things we do in a main audit, because these are the things that will show up the most issues early on. We want to preload or front load the audit with as many issues as possible. We don't want to leave showing the team all the main issues at the last day of the audit. We want to show as many on the first few days as possible. So these are the things which would normally show up the most issues for an audit. So code check, that includes looking at dev tools, looking at patterns, making sure the attributes are there, making sure that the journeys are working as we might expect them to, from a usability point of view, from a cognition point of view, make sure that the content makes sense, make sure that hierarchies make sense, make sure that headings are in the correct hierarchy to match the visual hierarchy, that kind of thing. We'll also run some validation for HTML and for accessibility testing. And we'll also do keyboard only while at it at the same time. Okay, so with that, let's get on to the audit itself.
But the first thing I would generally do is put up the DevTools, fire up the console. I see we're using the prototype kit for this service. Shout out to the prototype kit people. And I've got a HTML validation plugin here. If anybody's interested, it's called Validity. And so this pulls up the HTML validation and it shows up any errors. So this one is actually to do with the crown. It's got a source on image inside an SVG, which is a non-issue as far as we're concerned here. But check HTML validation. Obviously, we're primarily concerned with stuff that's inside the main body of the page, but occasionally we do get teams doing custom things in the header and the footer, so it's worth always checking. So HTML seems fine. Next thing will be we'll check with an accessibility plugin. So there's a bunch of different ones out there. I would just encourage you to find one that suits you. I've bounced around a few different ones. Currently I'm using Axe DevTools. So I'm just going to scan the page. Again, we've only got one issue, and it's this color contrast here. This flag on the issue here means that really it's a visual check. It's not something they can determine programmatically. It needs your eyes on it to check it's okay. And it's to do with the copyright logo down the bottom here. Because there's a background image and there's text inside the container that's got a background image, it's not sure if the background image is obscuring the text or not, so it just needs you to check that over, and that's fine. So those are the main two checks that we do for every page we're landing on when we're doing these pre-audit checks. And a few other things we might do when we're landing on a page is we want to check for the hierarchy of information. So again, visual check, does everything look like it makes sense, especially where there's a lot of text involved, with headings and sections, that kind of thing. Does the order of the text, does the visual hierarchy make sense to the user? As I said, do the patterns match what you'd expect from that pattern? If they're going off pattern, that can be a concern. Patterns are good for accessibility decisions which have been baked into those patterns. There's a lot of testing goes into patterns when they're published. So if a team's doing its own thing, we need to make sure that the team's done the same sort of level of diligence around their accessibility testing and usability testing. Patterns are also really good for ensuring that users don't have to relearn how to use the interface. So consistency, that's really important for people with some cognitive issues. So if we're switching patterns around during the service, then that can cause problems for people who are used to seeing the same thing for how to do something. And we also want to make sure that the user is not being overwhelmed by information. Is there a lot going on the screen? Is there too much information on the screen? And we might also have a quick look at if there's a more complex layout like this one, we might do a very quick and dirty mobile test. We'll be looking at mobile devices later on in the audit, but for now we might also want to have a quick just double check in the browser tools to make sure that it seems to fit a mobile layout. It responds down fine, that's good. If we thought there might be JavaScript being used on the page, we'd also disable JavaScript and run the page to make sure that those features are working as well still. So with that all completed, let's do our keyboard test. So I'm just going to reload the page to make sure we're starting it fresh, and I'm just going to tab down. So what we're checking here is that the focus order is correct, so it matches the visual order of items on the page. and that the focus style is obvious, that we can see the focus on the page. We're not hunting around for it anywhere. So we've got skip to main content. We'll also check that the skip to main content works, so I'll do that in a second. So I'll go through, make sure that these are all highlighting fine. That's good. So we'll go back up to the skip to main content, action that, and yeah, that's fine. So that's taking us into the main content, and then the next tab is hitting the first link in the page. That's good. So this is all fine.
So the next thing we would do is run our own checker. So we've got this plugin which will run a bunch of checks against the page. It'll highlight some stuff which we can find using just DevTools, but it exposes it for us, makes it easier for us to do a very, very quick test on the page, make sure that the heading hierarchies are correct, make sure that the ARIA is set up correctly for inputs, make sure that if there's hidden content on the page that we can see it easily, and make sure that it's not got any odd content in it. Just a few other checks as well, all inside this settings field. So it checks page title against the H1, checks some libraries, as it checks some markup, etc. But the main thing is it basically just does stuff you can do yourself using just DevTools. So here it's just saying that the service gem isn't matched. That's fine because we're on basically the launch page. So the apply for permit is the H1 and is a service name, so you don't want to be replicating that. No timeout dialog found. That's an important one because we know that people might need extra time if they're using assistive tech to complete tasks. So we'd make sure that a service has a timeout dialog on it to allow them to extend their session. And you can see here we've got some ARIA being set up. So this is basically reading out the ARIA from described by on each link is reading out the status here. So if somebody's coming down and navigating by links, they're hearing the status as they go down. That's part of the pattern. Okay, so one thing it also does down here, you can see there's a support links, hidden content being exposed as well. So we're not going to use this plugin for the rest of the testing just because it's unique to our team, and we want to show you some techniques that we can use on your own services. So we're just going to continue with the next phase of the testing, which is moving to the next page and your contact details.
So now onto a page with a form. So when there's a form, again, the journey maps will provide us with the data that they want us to input into the form, and that will determine how the journey progresses. You know, whether a user is returned with that data or not. So we need to follow the steps in the journey, but we'll also do some sort of testing around the edges as well. So we'll do our initial checks, but what we're going to do first is we're going to just trigger the error state of the form. We know this is a required field. It's not an optional field. The way the government forms work, we always state if it's an optional field or not. So again, we're going to just run through the keyboard checks. And we've gone down into the form there. What we're going to do is just put it into its blank state, error state. So it's going to hit save continue without putting any data in. So here we've got a bunch of other stuff we can check. So we want to make sure that up here in the tab we've got error as the prefix for the page title. Obviously, we're always checking that the page title describes the page itself. Ideally, it should match the H1. Not always possible, but it should definitely describe what the page is containing. So a screen reader user who's navigating through the page tabs can hear that, and also the page title is the first thing that a screen reader user will hear when they hit a page. The second thing is that the error summary is being highlighted. This is good for keyboard users because they don't have to, again, navigate down from the top. They've focus gone straight to the error summary, so their next tab will be the link to the actual field itself. We're also going to check the styles, make sure that the styles work. So again, we're looking at the error on the input. We've got the red border. We'll make sure that the focus is the thicker border with the highlight. That meets the WCAG 2.1 requirements for the focus highlight. We've got an error message, which is descriptive. The error messages for blank states tend to be very, very similar. They always just enter the thing. What we'll go into in a second is the error states for the data errors, which are a little bit more complex. So everything is looking good so far. What we also want to check is our usual checks. So again, we want to go through and check our HTML validation. So just run our little plugin. So again, we've got one validation error. So again, this should be the crown. So here it is. And then we'll run X again. So 2 issues. So we've got color contrast from the logo in the bottom again, and all page content should be contained by landmarks. So this is a best practice rather than a WCAG issue. It's ideally it is for people who are using screen readers who might navigate by a region. So if you're using a screen reader, you can pull up a list of regions on the page, or you might just navigate by a shortcut key to jump to the main region, or the banner, or the footer complementary region, and it allows you just to bounce around the page a little bit quicker. What's happening here is this backlink up here is kind of in between. I think this is outside the main banner, but it's also outside the main content. So the next thing we'll do is check some other things. So we'll check that the hint and the error are referenced to the input correctly. So we'll just do that very quickly with the DevTools. So what we're looking for here is this input to have ARIA on it, and it to be referencing these 2 pieces of text. Also that this H1 is also a label. We just do that quick visual test by just clicking on it and make sure that it focuses the input, and that's fine. So we've got the hint here, which is UTR hint ID, and we've got the ARIA described by down here, which is UTR hint and ref error, and that's the error message there, and that's all fine. But make sure that the ARIA described by is in the same order as the ARIA visually, because this is the order they'll get read out in. So we want it to be read out in the same order as actually on the page. And in the error, we want to make sure that the new patterns are being adhered to. So this is where the error is being prefixed by the word error, so a screen reader user can get the same level of information that a visual
JAWS dialog. OK button to activate. Press space bar.
Get from the colours on the screen. Let me just click that. It's like JAWS interrupted me there. What we're going to do next is just to make sure that the data is being sanitized correctly. So I'm going to enter the reference. I'm going to use the reference up here. So this is the one that's also in the steps. But I'm going to add some spaces. So I'm just going to do 12, 34, 56, 56, 78, 90. So hopefully, because UTRs are 10 numbers, it's easy to work out and get rid of those spaces on the server side. So hopefully we're doing the same thing on here. No, so we're not. So the issue here is that the server side is validating on a strict 10 number. So although we've got 10 numbers in there, we've got more than 10 characters. We've got those spaces in between. So this means that the data, whilst it seems okay, if visually it's fine, it actually means the same thing. It's going to get rejected based on those spaces. So why is that important? Well, let's have a look at a control on my iPad just to show what this issue, what always happens for people using assistive tech. So I'm going to be using voice access on the iPad. So you can access that by going to accessibility and then voice control and enabling the voice control at the top. It's called voice access on Android. There's also versions on Mac desktop and on Windows. They all use very similar commands. So to start it listening, you say wake up, wake up. Tap your contact details. Tap text. 12, 34, 56, 78, 90. Go to sleep. So you can see here, when I'm using a voice command, what I do is I break up that long number into smaller numbers, just as you would when you're reading out a phone number. So instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, you would break it up into 12, 34, 56, etc. And every time you do that, it creates its word boundary, and the voice access puts a space in there. So obviously that is what the users read out. It's entirely correct, but the assistive tech has obviously interpreted it slightly different. But there's no reason why we can't accept that, so we should allow those spaces. We should allow the user to enter that. Similarly, with lowercase and uppercase, we should allow case insensitivity if it doesn't make any difference to the meaning of the data. It's quite difficult for a user of voice control to go back and delete those spaces. So we shouldn't be asking them to do that. It's quite tough, especially if you're a new user like me. It is also difficult for people who have mobility issues to do that, especially when they've got hand tremors, so that the sort of fine motor control is impaired. Or if you've ever done it on a mobile device while you're walking or in some transport or something, trying to get in there to delete spaces is really quite difficult. So it helps everybody and speeds up data access, makes it a lot easier. So we should always be doing that. So let's get rid of that. So let's put in our first issue. So we're going to record this as an issue to the team because it's actually part of the guidance from in the GovUK design patterns under validation. So what we're going to do is create a new issue, which is going to go in here. So this is our new issue template. So every time we create a new issue, this is kind of the guidelines we follow. So we're going to create a new issue for validation of the UTR. And what we do is we say if it's a WCAG 2.1 violation. This is not. It's really a annoyance, a speed bump. We say which page it's on. So this is on the what is your self-assessment UTR. We grab the URL from the page. There we go. Obviously that'll be a real URL. Then we can do the description. So description we want to be useful for the team in telling them what the problem is and why it's a problem. We want to sort of help the team understand why they're fixing this, not just tell them they need to fix it. This is quite a common issue. So we've actually got we've created some snippets of some common issue tickets. And so I'm just going to grab this. And so we're going to give the team a good indication of why something is causing an issue for users. And we're saying here voice control software at spaces can be difficult for mobility or dexterity issues, etc. So it gives the team an insight as to why they should be fixing it. And this snippet also shows us how we can resolve it. So I'm going to copy that over. And these snippets are useful because we decided doing these. It helps us to make sure that we're being consistent in our recording of issues. Also speeds up our audits a little bit. But also it'll be a resource for people to go to see how to do good accessibility in the future. So I'm just going to add a bit of formatting. Get rid of the sort code one because we don't need that, and I don't think we need. We'll leave the case insensitive because I think the UTRs can actually accept a K at the end. So then we've got let's put that validation link in there. Where we can, we really like to point to guidance on some things. So here there's actually some information on the validation pattern in the design system. So we really like to point people out to publish guidance if there is it available, because that helps them learn from the canon, the source. And we also put labels on all our issues. So I'm going to assign this to me. Okay. So we've got labels for all of the components and patterns in both the HMRC and the Gov UK design pattern libraries. This is for our benefit really. It allows us to perform metrics in the future to see if a particular pattern is causing issues for teams, and whether the teams need more help in implementing something, whether there's something in our platform libraries which is causing a problem for teams with that particular component, or even if the component or the guidance itself needs updating to include a bit more help for teams to implement it. So it's all good metric stuff. So there's a validation pattern in here. I'm also going to include the UTR pattern because we've got a UTR pattern in HMRC, so that'll be included there. And we've also got a task for, a label for each of our tasks as well. So this comes under our code task. And then we assign it to the project. So I'm just going to grab that one. So this is the project that we're reporting the issue for. Something we also do is we make sure that we include a screenshot. So we want to both describe the issue, but also show the issue. This helps both us when we're coming to retest. It makes it really easy to remember what the issue was if we can't glean it from our description. But also helps the team pinpoint exactly what we're talking about. So I'm just going to do a quick screenshot. So I'll grab the page. So we just need the actual part of the screen. If we're talking about a missing attribute or some missing HTML or malformed HTML, we'll also include a DevTools as part of that screenshot, so we can actually show the code behind the UI as well. Makes it easy again for us to retest. We see the code that's changed, and easy again for the team to actually see exactly what we're pointing at. We might actually also include a second screenshot if we are advising a team to do something differently. We might actually do some editing in DevTools on the page and then screenshot that result and sort of do a side by side, sort of saying this is what you've got now, we recommend you doing this. Most of the things we put in our resolves are recommendations. We're not prescriptive about what we're telling teams to do. This is probably the best way for them to do it, but it is open to them finding another solution as well, which obviously we'll look at when it comes back for a retest. So we'll just have a quick look, make sure that looks okay. That's fine. And then we'll submit that issue. And that hopefully will pop up in our board down here. Let's drag that across the issues. So when it comes back for a retest, we'll come into this board again and we can see all the issues in this column. We would add another column here, and then we can move issues across to being fixed, and then we can see exactly what's still outstanding. Makes it a lot easier to do the retests. Okay, so let's move on with our audit. So we're going to jump past this, put in the data that they really want us to put in. And so we're going to this email address. So again, we'll do the normal checks. We'll do HTML validation. We'll do ACKS again. I would expect these to be fine. So again, we got a standard one there, and again, I think we should have a standard one in the. Yeah, we got the contrast, and we got the landmarks for the backlink there. So what we want to make sure on this page again is we'll just trigger the error state, do all our normal keyboard tests. I won't do them to save time, but we do all normal keyboard tests, etc. And then we've got our blank error here. We make sure that everything is associated. We're talking about email addresses here. This is a personal email address of the user, so what we would want to see is an autocomplete. So we want autocomplete of email for this input, which is missing. So autocomplete is something which will help a user fill in data that they've already previously added. So this is data stored by the browser based on stuff you've added before. So this is your personal data, so your name, your address, your email address, your phone number, that kind of thing. And it just makes it a lot easier for people to enter their data. It's better for the service because it means people aren't doing spelling mistakes of commonly entered stuff. It's all pulled from the browser. It's good for the user because it means they don't have to remember things, especially for people who've got issues with recall, with short memory issues. Anybody who might benefit from less typing, so people with mobility issues, people using switch devices. So this whole recognition versus recall thing around cognitive disability, this is what this is for, helping people enter data. Now you might see sometimes that browsers, when there's no autocomplete there, they might actually do it anyway, and they're doing heuristics based on the name of the field or the name of the label. But the way that can lead to misinterpretation of input fields. So it's really recommended that you actually add the autocomplete and tell the browser specifically what field you want in there, because they can make mistakes and put the wrong data in, and editing incorrect data is worse for the user than having to put it in the first time round. So I would like to see a autocomplete in there, so that'd be another issue we'd raise. We've got the hint in the error, that's fine. So let's just check. So now we're using a type email here, and this type email is one of the triggers that would fire off HTML5 validation. So if I just put in just bobexample.com, so that's an incorrect email address, obviously. So yeah, so this is firing off HTML5 validation rather than our GovUK style validation. So now you see here straight away you can see an issue. The validation disappeared. So if I hit enter again, it goes as soon as you focus on something. So if you've got hand tremor and you're trying to touch on the screen, and if you don't hit the right thing, you're going to dismiss that straight away before you even read it. So that's really difficult to read. And obviously the styling, if this was like a non error state that we had in originally, then you wouldn't see any styling there, you wouldn't get the attention drawn to that field. So we don't want that validation to kick in, so you need to add a no validate attribute to the form tag to stop that doing it. So that'd be another issue. Again, we would add that in as an issue for the team to fix. So let's just again continue on. Another issue about HTML file validation is it'll only report one error at a time. So if you've got a field like this and you had HTML file validation enabled and you put data in these as wrong data and you hit save continue, it would only tell you about the first field. Then you correct that one, hit save continue, then it tell you about the second field. So it's really drawn out procedure. So on this field, again, we're going to do some normal validation checks. So HTML. So HTML validation is really important because the HTML is what is sent to the assistive tech as part of the accessibility tree. So if you look in DevTools, there's an accessibility panel, and this gives you the accessibility tree and tells you exactly what's on the page and what's going on and what each of these things is. So if we have a look at this first field here, so we've got a first name, and that first name, it shows down here. It's pulling the first name from the label. So if we, there we go, that's better. It's pulling this accessible name from the label, from the for attribute. So that association has been set up to bring in the content of that label. And you can see the order of checking that it'll do. So if you add an ARIA label in, it'll prefer that over the label. So this is what the assistive tech uses to inform the user about what's going on the page. So this is built off the DOM, so making sure that the HTML is valid is really important, because invalid HTML can alter that DOM that's sent to the accessibility tree and in turn sent to the assistive text. So incorrect HTML can have a knock-on effect to assistive text and how it's interpreted. So make sure you get your HTML validated. So let's look at our validation. So we've got an error here. So again, we've got our logo thing, but here we've got a value for attribute or label. So again, line 122. So when you're looking at HTML validation, always look at the view source, because what you see in the DevTools is the browser fixed version is what is interpreted, because HTML is, the browsers will forgive a lot of errors just to get your page rendered, and they will fix stuff. So what you see in the DevTools is generally the fixed version. To see the actual stuff that the server sent, you look at the view source. And here we were looking at line 122. It says down here. So we look at 122, and this is the postcode. Is it? Oh no. Yeah, postcode. So you can see postcode here. So we've got postal code and we got postcode. So this for attribute doesn't match the ID down here. So that's why there's an error there. So it's saying this for attribute doesn't exist. The ID here doesn't exist. So that's an HTML error. Let's see what Axe makes of it. So they're coming from the other way. They're saying that the form element, this one, doesn't have a label. So you can't see a label with the ID. So it's coming from the opposite direction, but both reaching the same conclusion, that you've got a mislabeled field there. And as you can see here, it gives us a bunch of WCAG violations. So this is name and info violations. So what we want to look at now is the error state. What we're going to actually do is have a look at this in JAWS. So I'm just going to pull up JAWS. So JAWS is a screen reader on Windows. It's quite a popular screen reader, but it's a licensed
JAWS
version. So let's get refreshed just to kick in.
Your details apply for a permit-gov.uk Google Chrome. Your details apply for a permit-gov.uk. Page has 3 regions, 2 headings and 8 links. Page has 3 regions, 2 headings and 8 links.
So it's just telling us the information on the page. So when I'm using screen reader like JAWS, I will generally jump to the first heading on the page, and this is quite a common process for screen reader users.
Your details heading level 1.
So there I've used a shortcut key to jump to the first heading, so I'm on your details. And now I'm just going to run through the fields themselves, so I'm going to get them using a shortcut key to navigate by field.
First name edit.
So you hear I've jumped over the label, but it's pulled in the label as part of the input.
Last name edit. Optional for non-UK addresses edit.
Okay, so this is kind of weird. So rather than, we know there's no label on that field, but what's happened here is JAWS does some heuristics. So it looks at the page and says, right, this field's not got any label on it, but we know labels normally are above the field. So this text that's above the field is probably the label. So we'll just call that out as the label. It's wrong, and it can cause issues. But that's what JAWS does. VoiceOver is meant to do the similar kind of thing, but it doesn't. So if we have a look at VoiceOver with this, let's jump through this. So if we pull up VoiceOver, this is on Mac. Second to kick in.
VoiceOver on Safari. Your details. Apply for a permit. Gov UK. Window. Your details. Apply for a permit. Gov UK. Web content. First name. Last name. Edit text with autofill menu. Edit text with autofill menu. Blank. To open the autofill menu.
So here we can see that VoiceOver just said edit text. He's got no idea what the label is, because obviously there wasn't a label attached, and it's not doing the heuristics that JAWS is doing, so it's not saying optional for non-UK addresses.
VoiceOver off.
So you can see the benefit of testing in multiple screen readers and also looking at code and running accessibility plugins, and not just testing in one single screen reader, because it won't give you the full picture. What I'm going to do here
list
is
of 3 items. Same page link, enter your same page link, and same page link, enter your postcode, enter. Edit as pop-up menu, edit as pop-up, type in text. Select the form field dialog. List 1, list 2.
You see
First
here,
name edit.
what's
1 of
happened
4.
is
To move the
that
items, use the arrow keys.
now that the error message is there, that's taken up the position of its heuristic label. So now it's saying the error, enter your postcode is the label, which is kind of more useful, but it's still incorrect. So again, always test in multiple screen readers and use accessibility plugins and check code.
Escape, type in text, edit as pop-up.
What you saw there was me jumping through from field to field using shortcut keys, and that's something that screen reader users will do. Once they're in a form, they know they're in a form, and they will just jump to the next field to enter the data, knowing that the label will get read out. So that makes it also important that your error messages are linked up correctly, because otherwise they will not get read out. Also, you don't intersperse non-form data with form fields, because the users are quite likely just to skip right over them and not hear them. So that's an important thing to take away from that. So I'm going to leave the testing there. We're going to jump on to the technical summary, which is the last part of the audit. So once we've got all our issues reported and the lining up in here, we've done all these all the way through every journey. Also, all the tasks have been completed from end to end for each journey. Then we write up our technical summary, and the technical summary is basically a prioritization list for the team. So we take each of our issues and we put them into these tables. So we have the WCAG violations, so WCAG A and AA issues, and we put the issue and the link to the issue page in here. So link to this page, for example. We identify the success criterion that is failing on, and there's a column here for when we verify a fix on a retest. Do the same again for the non-WCAG A or AA issues, and this time we prioritize them 1, 2, 3. So 1 are what we basically classify as our WCAG-like issues. So these are things that we want the teams to fix alongside their WCAG issues. So these are as important, we feel, as those WCAG issues. They will cause significant issues for some users. Priority 2 are lesser issues, but they're still quite speed bumps for the users to get past. Priority 3 these are generally low-level issues. There are maybe annoyances or styling issues or issues to do with code quality, etc. So much lower issues. So we'll prioritize all the issues here into these tables, and then that'll get sent off to a member of our team, Angela, who will put together a report. Before that happens, though, we will tag another member of our auditing team for a peer review, and they will go through all these issues and make sure that the descriptions are meaningful, so they can make sense of them, even though they've not been doing the audit themselves. The success criterion match the issue. The WCAG criteria, some of them are a little bit subjective, so there is a little bit of discussion goes on sometimes as to where we should place them, and the priority of issues, whether something should be moved up or down the priority list. And that's it. That is how we approach audits at HMRC. So thank you very much.